The story of the man the world knows as Bad Bunny does not begin under the blinding neon of a stadium, but in the quiet, salt-aired town of Vega Baja, Puerto Rico. Born in 1994, Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio was the eldest of three sons, raised in a household where the rhythm of the island was the heartbeat of the home. His father was a truck driver, his mother a school teacher. They provided a life defined by humble stability and deep cultural immersion. From a young age, Benito was an observer. While other children were lost in the standard escapism of youth, he was absorbing the lyrics of Hector Lavoe and the poetic cadence of Vico C. His transformation began in the church choir, where he first discovered the power of his voice, though it was a power he felt constrained by. He was a creative spirit trapped in the expectations of a traditional upbringing. The moniker Bad Bunny came from a childhood photograph where he was forced to wear a rabbit costume to school, his face contorted in a scowl of pure, unfiltered rebellion. It was a premonition. Even as a child, Benito refused to be the cute version of what society demanded. He began writing songs at 13, hiding in his room, crafting a sonic world where he could be both the romantic and the revolutionary. The supermarket alchemist. Before he was a global icon, Benito was a bagger at an Econo supermarket. This period of his life is essential to understanding his later defiance. He spent his days packing groceries for the people of his community, seeing firsthand the struggles of a population living under the shadow of economic instability and colonial oversight. He was a laborer among laborers. However, his mind was elsewhere. Between shifts, he uploaded tracks to SoundCloud, blending the dark, moody aesthetics of trap with the unapologetic swagger of reggaeton. His rise was not an accident of luck, but a byproduct of a changing digital landscape. He represented a DIY generation that no longer needed the permission of major labels to be heard. When his music finally caught fire, he didn't move to Los Angeles or New York to fit in. He stayed rooted in the archipelago. He understood that his power didn't come from assimilation, it came from his refusal to translate himself for the English-speaking world. This stubbornness became his greatest asset. He was telling the world, if you want to hear me, you must learn my language. The architect of the new resistance. As his fame reached a fever pitch in the late 2010s, Benito transitioned from a musician to a cultural catalyst. His involvement in the 2019 protests in Puerto Rico, Telegram Gate, marked a turning point. Alongside artists like Residente, he took to the streets to demand the resignation of Governor Ricardo Rossello. This wasn't a PR stunt, it was a reclamation of agency. He saw the systemic neglect you mentioned in your story, the crumbling infrastructure and the literal darkness that followed Hurricane Maria, and he chose to use his platform as a megaphone for the marginalized. His albums became more than just collections of hits, they were cultural documents. El Último Tour del Mundo and Un Verano Sin Ti challenged the hyper-masculinity of the genre, with Benito donning skirts and painted nails, advocating for LGBTQ+ rights and condemning domestic violence. He was deconstructing the macho trope of the Latin superstar, replacing it with a fluid, empathetic, yet fiercely protective identity. He wasn't just making music for the club, he was making music for the kid in Vega Baja who felt like they didn't belong. The Manifesto, Super Bowl LX60. All of these threads, the grocery store shifts, the street protests, and the musical rebellion, culminated on February 8, 2026. The world saw a halftime show. Puerto Rico saw a vindication. When Benito stepped onto that stage, he wasn't just a performer. He was a Trojan horse. By opening with a tribute to Anthony Santos, he forced a global audience of millions to acknowledge that the roots of modern pop are buried deep in the soil of the Caribbean. The simulated sugarcane fields were a stroke of genius. In the middle of America's most capitalist spectacle, he forced the viewer to look at the history of colonial exploitation. The dancers weren't just moving to a beat, they were enacting the labor of ancestors who had been bled dry by the sugar industry. When he climbed those sparking electrical poles during El Apagón, he was personifying the anger of an island that had been left in the dark by its own government. It was a visceral, dangerous visual that served as a middle finger to those who viewed Puerto Rico as merely a vacation destination, rather than a home of 3 million resilient souls. The unfurling of the light blue flag was the final, most radical act. As you noted, the gag law, la ley de la Mordaza, of the mid-20th century was a dark stain on history, an era where Puerto Rican identity was literally a crime. By holding that specific shade of blue, the original sky blue of the resistance, Benito was speaking directly to the ancestors. He was telling the gagged generation that their silence was over. He was using the most watched television event in history to commit an act that 70 years prior would have seen him rot in a prison cell. The later years, the elder statesman of the Antilles. Following the 2026 performance, Benito's career shifted into a more intentional, philanthropic phase. He didn't chase the charts as aggressively, focusing instead on the Good Bunny Foundation. He invested millions into the arts and sports programs in Puerto Rico, ensuring that the next generation of Bennies wouldn't have to struggle as he did. He became a cinematic force as well, portraying complex characters that moved beyond the Latino criminal stereotype, further cementing his role as a disruptor of narratives. As he aged, he retreated more into the interior of the island he loved. He became a recluse in the best sense, a mythical figure who would occasionally release a single poem or a folk-heavy track that reminded the world he was still watching. He never moved to a mansion in Miami. He stayed where the air smelt of salt and the sounds of coqui frogs filled the night. He remained a man of the people, often spotted in local chinchorros sharing a drink with the same people he used to bag groceries for. The Sunset, a legacy written in blue. Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio passed away as he lived, on his own terms, surrounded by the family and the land that birthed him. His death wasn't met with just mourning, but with a global celebration of identity. He had achieved the impossible. He became the biggest star on the planet without ever compromising his soul, his language, or his flag. He left a world that was slightly more colorful, slightly more empathetic, and significantly louder. He taught a generation of artists that you don't have to change who you are to conquer the world. You just have to wait for the world to catch up to you. His life was a 1,500-page poem written in the key of defiance. From the scowling boy in the rabbit suit to the man who decolonized the Super Bowl, Benito proved that the most powerful thing a person can be is themselves, unapologetically, loudly, and in their own tongue. The light blue flag he raised in 2026 now hangs in museums and on the balconies of homes across the diaspora. It is no longer a symbol of a crime, it is the symbol of a triumph. Benito didn't just play the game, he changed the rules for everyone who came after him.